Battery lessons with Tim. Meow.
So we're gonna do the warp test and the clay memory test and that kind of stuff. I'm just gonna start by cutting some ruler-sized strips here. So these strips we're gonna bend in a particular manner. They are leather hardish in that they will take some scrap here. When I push on it, it'll still move without cracking, but it's hard enough that I can't wiggle it. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9. First test, we're going to bend it from flat. So it is completely flat, and we're going to bend it into a shape. That shape, we're going to kind of base around, make sure that's in camera, that guy there. I'm going to start there. I'm going to bend it so that the edges are straight, you know, from that point. And because it's leather hard, it's going to want to spring a little bit, and I'm going to let it spring that little bit after that shape. Now we're going to set it down there. And we will do this, we'll do it twice. We'll do it twice so that we get a accurate final there. And I will put them right on the board that we will watch from. Number 3, probably should have cut all the way through those, huh? That'd have been smart. There, that's better. Number 3, rather than just bend it around there, we're gonna bend it backwards first, and then we'll bend it around it. We'll do the same with 4. We're gonna bend backwards and then around. And then for 5 and 6, we are going to bend, because normally we've been going this way, we're gonna bend it that way first, but we're gonna over bend it. So I'm gonna bend past that curve that we would normally have. We're gonna go past it, and then we're going to open it back up to that curve. And we'll do that twice. Bend it past. Kind of like we're pre-curling it. All right, we got 3 more that we can make, because those are the major tests. Those are the things that really show us the memory part. But we're going to do a couple more. We're going to do one in a strip form. So again, this would be the outside bendy kind of thing. So we're going to take and we're going to bend it around there. With the number up, we're going to flatten it out and put it flat against the board. With the number down, we're going to put it around for 8. We're going to open it up and flatten it out. And we're going to keep the number up. And for 9, we're not going to do anything. We're going to leave it as is, and we're going to put it flat on the board. So our board right now looks like this. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's backwards. And then we'll go 7. Oh shit. Fudged that one up. Good job, Tim. 8, 9. And then we're going to do the flat test. The bigger test here. Trying to keep it from not, making it unflat. Cut a square here. 11 and 12. So the first one These are talked about that you get warping if you move your slab around. So this one, we're gonna bend all the corners up on 10. I'm gonna bend them all up like we done warped it. And we're gonna flatten it down, just flat, that's all. And we're gonna set it down. We're gonna do the same thing with 11. We're just gonna do it upside down. So I'm moving all these edges up. Totally warped, right? Ugh, so disgusting, what a warp. And then we're gonna flatten it out and put it on the board. The last one, 12, we're gonna do nothing to. We're not gonna distort it, we're not gonna warp it, we're just gonna set it on the board. And then we're gonna time lapse these. I can talk quickly about the results from our test. This test did come from a discussion we had on Clay Buddies, and there is a live stream kind of going through all these ideas. And the reason I made this video is to push it over to Clay Buddies so that they can see the stuff, but I figure I did it this much, I might as well post it on YouTube as well. So we have the first tests where we bent it around once. We could see how much they opened up. In the time lapse, you can see them go whoop. And that is the same one. And we can see that if we put them side by side, it's nearly identical. That the test, it's bearing out that it's the same thing over and over. This is the one that we bent the opposite and then bent around. And that one, you can see, is also really close to the same. There's a little bit more variation because of how we bent it the first time after we bent it. But the star of the show here is going to be the one we overbent and then put back. And again, they are pretty close as well. But this one is important when it comes to handles. And a lot of people will get cracking on their handles and, they don't know why. Well, one of the reasons why is because of how they bend it. If you were to take your handle and you were just to put it on and then bend it and stick it, you have all that tension. It's this much tension in the handle. If you overbend it, bend it past what you want, and then open it up to where you want it to be, then it doesn't move. You can see in the time lapse, this barely moves at all. You'll see it shrink as it dries, but the mug would as well. This, when you put it on and bend it, it wants to sproing back. And that sproing puts a lot of tension on the joints and the handle itself. That's one of the parts where you can get cracking. The tests where we bent them, flipped them over and everything, we can see that no matter which way they were drying, ended up having the same amount of warp when they're this small. The flat one has just a little bit of warp, and that's from as it dries. This top surface is drying first and wanting to peel up a little bit. So we're gonna move that stuff off to the side. In the same kind of test as those, there were a couple more strips that I made later on that were much drier. They were almost to the point where I couldn't bend them. You can see the cracking. And we have the one where it was overbent and opened up, and it's a lot like the rest of them. In that, it didn't move. And then we had the one where it was bent just around it and it opened up similarly to the others, and the overbent, or the reverse bend one that opened up a lot. All right, so those are all done. Put those over there. I'm gonna end up bisque firing them and glaze firing them to show that, how much they move in those firings as well. Lastly, we have our flat tile ones, 10, 11, and 12. 10 was the one that we warped up and then flattened out. And you can see that it's warped all over the place, right? A lot of warping happening there. 11 was the one we warped down, flattened out. And you can see that the drying wasn't enough to unflatten it. But these are pretty much treated the same way. One dried upside down, one dried right side up. And you can see how much the original warp that we put on it affects it. That, it's still gonna warp. And then lastly, the one that we just put on flat and how warped that is. So this is the one I really want to talk about because I think this is the most important example of this flat one here. A lot of times when we're making stuff, especially out of slabs, we're told not to move the slab around or you're gonna cause a warp. And we can see that it does have a bearing on that, right? There is a bearing, but let's say you do everything perfect and you still get a warp. Well, what do you blame it on then? and it ends up being the drying, that this piece is now fairly warped, and it is from the surface on the top drying, and as it dries it contracts, and as it contracts it brings it up. And as soon as this part sets, the rest of it doesn't have the strength to then flatten it out as it dries. So you end up with a warp from drying. And I mean, that's why we did the time lapses, because you can see it happening. You see it right there when it works. And there you go. Boop.